On June 19, 2026, President Trump unveiled a new Air Force One at Joint Base Andrews. The plane is a 13-year-old Boeing 747-8. It was built in 2012 for the royal family of Qatar. It was donated to the United States government in May 2025. The Air Force spent approximately $400 million modifying it to presidential standards. Secure communications, countermeasures, hardened systems. And now it is the plane that carries the President of the United States. At the same time, there is a separate program. Two brand new Boeing 747-8 aircraft, purpose-built, contracted by the U.S. Air Force in 2018, originally scheduled for delivery in 2024. They are now expected in 2028, maybe later. Boeing has lost more than $2.4 billion on that program. The total taxpayer commitment has risen from $3.9 billion to approximately $6.2 billion. And the planes are not here yet. Here is the thing. Nobody is asking the question that actually matters. The United States government is simultaneously running a $6.2 billion program to build the most advanced presidential aircraft ever constructed, and flying the president in a plane donated by a foreign government, retrofitted with $400 million from a nuclear missile program. Who is paying for all of this? And what exactly did they get? Let's start at the beginning of this story. In 2018, the Trump administration negotiated a fixed-price contract with Boeing to build two new presidential aircraft, the VC-25B program. The contract value, $3.9 billion. President Trump declared at the time that he had saved taxpayers $1.4 billion by driving a hard bargain with Boeing. The fixed-price structure meant Boeing absorbed cost overruns, not the government. It was supposed to be the disciplined, responsible way to run a major defense procurement. The two 747-8 airframes had been purchased at a reduced cost because they were originally built for Transero, a Russian airline, and never delivered before that carrier collapsed. The Air Force acquired them as the base for the most sophisticated presidential aircraft ever designed: new communication suites, aerial refueling capability, hardened electronics, secure conference rooms, medical facilities, an executive suite, and the kind of defensive systems that are classified in their specifics but substantial in their scope. Here is where the fixed-price contract stopped being a taxpayer protection and started being a Boeing disaster. Every change order, every security requirement update, every redesign requested across multiple administrations, Boeing absorbed the cost. Labor shortages, high turnover among workers with the specific security clearances required for classified systems installation, complex wiring and cooling challenges unique to a one-of-a-kind aircraft, technical problems that would be manageable on a standard commercial build became expensive and time-consuming on a plane where every system had to meet military and presidential standards simultaneously. By 2025, Boeing had accumulated more than $2.4 billion in losses on the VC-25B program. The aircraft that was supposed to arrive in 2024 had its first flight pushed to March 2026, a 16-month delay on the test flight alone. Delivery of the first operational aircraft shifted to mid-2028. Some estimates suggest 2029 or later. The total program cost, including infrastructure, testing, and additional contract modifications, has risen from $3.9 billion to approximately $2 billion on the government side. Here is a number that should stop you for a second. The original fixed-price contract was supposed to protect the taxpayer from exactly this kind of escalation. And on paper, it did. Boeing absorbed the $2.4 billion in losses, not the government. But the $6.2 billion taxpayer figure reflects the total program cost, including support infrastructure and ongoing modifications. The fixed price structure protected the original contract value. It did not protect against the program expanding, the timeline stretching, and the overhead costs accumulating over a decade-long delay. Now here's the thing. Does a $400 million plane from a foreign government actually cost nothing? Qatar donated a Boeing 747-8 to the United States government in May 2025. At the time of donation, its estimated value was approximately $400 million. The plane, a 13-year-old aircraft built for the Qatari royal family in 2012, is larger, newer, and more capable as a base platform than the current VC-25A aircraft that has carried presidents for more than 30 years. On paper, the United States received a $400 million plane for free. What the United States received in practice was a 747-8 in royal family configuration luxury finishes, royal suite, conference rooms built for Qatari heads of state that needed to be stripped and rebuilt to presidential security standards. The Air Force needed to install encrypted communications, electronic countermeasures, hardened cockpit systems, and classified defensive capabilities. In June 2025, Air Force Secretary Troy Mank testified before the Senate that the modification would cost approximately $400 million less than the $1 billion that independent aviation experts and some lawmakers had projected. But here is the part that sparked significant controversy. The funding for that $400 million retrofit did not come from a normal appropriation. The New York Times reported in July 2025 that $934 million was transferred from the LGM-35A Sentinel program, the intercontinental ballistic missile system that is one of the three legs of the U.S. nuclear deterrent, to fund the Qatar aircraft modifications. The Air Force Secretary confirmed to members of Congress that funds from the Sentinel missile program were being diverted for the Air Force One retrofit work. Critics from both parties raised concerns about diverting funds from a core nuclear deterrent program to accelerate a presidential aircraft that some described as primarily driven by political scheduling. Let that land for a second. The plane arrived as a gift, making its safe cost at least $400 million. That money came from a nuclear missile program. The plane will serve as a bridge aircraft for an estimated 2 to 3 years before it is retired, either replaced by the permanent VC-25Bs when they arrive, or transferred to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation no later than January 1, 2029. According to sources familiar with the acquisition plan, the emoluments question also generated significant debate. The Constitution's Foreign Emoluments Clause restricts federal office holders from accepting gifts from foreign governments without congressional consent. The administration argued that the gift was made to the government, not to the president personally, which legal scholars debated at length. The plane was ultimately accepted. The legal question was not definitively resolved. Now let's run the complete taxpayer math. Because when you add it all up across both programs, the total is significantly larger than any single headline number suggests. The VC-25B Permanent Replacement Program, $3.9 billion in the original fixed-price contract. Additional program costs infrastructure, support, testing, contract modifications, bringing the total taxpayer commitment to approximately $6.2 billion. Delivery now expected in 2028 at the earliest. The Qatar Bridge aircraft retrofit, $400 million in Air Force testimony, funded from the Sentinel missile program. Some reporting places the total transferred from Sentinel at $934 million, with the excess covering additional related costs and contingencies. The plane was designated the VC-25B bridge by the Air Force, a designation that places it within the same program family as the permanent aircraft but on a different track. The current fleet operating costs. The existing VC-25A aircraft, the two 747-200Bs that have served as Air Force One since 1990, cost approximately $210,000 per flight hour to operate. This is the most expensive aircraft in the Air Force inventory to fly, driven largely by the age of the platform and the fact that commercial carriers stopped flying the 747-200 long ago. Spare parts must be custom manufactured or salvaged. The longer the permanent replacements are delayed, the more years the aging VC-25As remain in service, accumulating maintenance costs that would not exist with a modern replacement fleet. The math is not complicated, but it is relentless. Original program commitment, $3.9 billion. Program growth, approximately $2.3 billion. Bridge aircraft retrofit, $400 million to $934 million from missile funds. Continued VC-25A operating costs during the delay period. Hundreds of millions in additional maintenance over the extended service life. Total government investment in presidential air transport across all programs since the 2018 contract, approaching $8 billion in committed and spent dollars, depending on how the missile fund transfer is ultimately accounted. The fixed-price contract was supposed to be the mechanism that transferred risk from taxpayers to Boeing. And for Boeing, that risk has been very real. $2.4 billion in losses is not a rounding error. It has contributed to financial pressure on Boeing's defense division and to broader questions about the company's management of complex government programs. For the taxpayer, the risk transferred was the per-unit contract price. The total program cost, including delays, bridge solutions, and the operational consequences of flying a 35-year-old platform for 4 additional years, is a different calculation entirely. Now zoom out entirely. Because the Air Force One program is not an isolated failure, it is the most visible instance of a pattern that repeats across nearly every major defense procurement program in the modern era. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, contracted in 2001 at an estimated $233 billion. Total acquisition costs now exceed $428 billion, 84% above the original estimate. Lifetime costs, including sustainment through its planned 77-year life cycle, are now projected to exceed $2 trillion. Mission-capable rate in fiscal year 2025, 44%, down from 67% in 2021. The Air Force has responded by cutting annual procurement from a planned 110 aircraft to 39 in fiscal year 2027. The KC-46 tanker, also a Boeing program, has faced similar delays and cost growth. The Sentinel ICBM replacement program, from which funds were diverted to pay for the Qatar Air Force One retrofit, has itself experienced substantial schedule pressure. The pattern is consistent. Government defines a requirement. Contractor accepts the contract at a competitive price. Requirements evolve. Complexity compounds. Costs escalate. Delivery slips. The taxpayer ends up with a late product at a premium. This is not a character flaw at Boeing or at the Pentagon. It is a feedback loop built into the structure of defense procurement. Requirements are written by people who want the best possible capability. Contractors price to win the contract, not to guarantee delivery. Fixed-price contracts transfer unit cost risk to the contractor, but leave program expansion risk with the government. And because the programs are too critical to cancel, you cannot simply decide not to have a new Air Force One. The leverage to enforce schedule and cost discipline is limited. The VC-25B is the most visible example because it is the president's plane. Every delay makes news. Every cost increase generates a headline. But the structure producing those headlines is the same structure that produced $428 billion in F-35 acquisition cost overruns and $2 trillion in lifetime sustainability costs, and that structure is still fully intact. The new Air Force One is flying. As of this summer, the Qatar-gifted 747 has entered service as the presidential aircraft after nearly a year of modifications paid for, with funds diverted from the nuclear deterrent. It will carry the president until the purpose-built VC-25Bs arrive, currently expected in 2028, though that timeline has moved before and may move again. The purpose-built planes will arrive. Eventually, Boeing will continue to absorb losses on a fixed-price contract that has already cost the company more than $2.4 billion. The Air Force will fly a 35-year-old fleet alongside a 13-year-old foreign-gifted aircraft for the next 2 years. The taxpayer will fund a program that started at $3.9 billion and is now tracking towards $6. $2 billion, alongside a bridge aircraft retrofit funded from a nuclear missile program. The question worth sitting with tonight is not whether the president deserves a new aircraft. The existing VC-25As are genuinely aging and genuinely expensive to maintain. The mission of presidential air transport is genuinely critical to national security. The case for replacement is real. The question is this: if the most powerful government on earth, with a decade of planning and $6 billion, cannot build its own presidential aircraft on schedule, and the interim solution is a plane donated by a Middle Eastern monarchy and paid for with money from the nuclear weapons program, what does that tell you about the gap between what the government promises and what it delivers, and about who is still paying for the gap?